Welcome to Lunch with the Lord. I'm Pastor Mark. We're in Esther chapter 1. We're going to be starting verse 13 this lesson. But before we begin, Jeremiah 15:16, Thy words were found, and I did eat them, and thy word was unto me the joy and the rejoicing of my heart. Now, as we start verse 13 to 18 is the counsel that's given to the king. All right, Vashti refuses to come before the king when he requested her to come. But now, what do you do about it? So the king is going to receive counsel of what to do with Vashti and the decision that she made. Now, verse 13, it says, Then the king said to the wise men which knew the times, for so was the king's manner towards all that knew law and judgment. Now it seems that verse 13 isn't during the drunken party. It seems like it's a day or two later when this takes place. That the king is in his right mind and he calls these men together. It says here, men which knew the times. Now, in context, it means those men who knew the laws and the customs of the land and that they would be able to give wise advice. Basically, King Ahasuerus called a bunch of lawyers together around him who knew all the laws and customs of the land to give him advice what to do with Vashti. And then it says, for so was the king's manner. When the king was faced with a difficult decision, he would call his advisors in order to get help on making that decision. Because the king didn't know everything. But he called these men in which knew the laws and the customs of the land. Now, verse 14 says, And the next unto him was Carshena, Shethar, Admartha, Tarshish, Meres, Marsha, Marsna, and Memucan, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, which saw the king's face, and which sat the first in the kingdom. Now, these were probably the 7 men of highest rank in his kingdom. They had continual access to the king, and they were his chief counselors. Now, verse 15 says, What shall we do unto the queen Vashti according to the law? Because she has not performed the commandment of the king Ahasuerus by the chamberlains. So it would be better stated if this verse said, instead of saying, what shall we do unto the queen Vashti according to the law, it would be better spoken, do we have a law in our land that tells us what to do with Vashti? This is why he's calling these specific men to him that know the customs and the laws, because he wants to know if there's a law that, that will help to deal with what Vashti did. Now, for the king to make a decision apart from a given law would make the king look very vengeful. But if there were a law, then it looks like he is protecting the kingdom. So the king here is trying to protect himself and to protect the kingdom. Now, what was Vashti's crime? What did she do? Well, her crime was, in the last part of verse 15, because she has not performed the commandment of the king Ahasuerus by the chamberlains. she basically disobeyed the king's request to come in, right? Now, verses 16 and 17 says, and Memucan answered before the king and the princes, Vashti, the queen, had not done wrong unto the king only, but also to all the princes and to all the people that are in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus. For this deed of the queen shall come abroad unto all women, so that they will despise their husbands in their eyes. And when it shall be reported, the king Ahasuerus commanded Vashti the queen to be brought in before him, and she came not. Right? Now, based upon Memucan's reply, there was no specific law dealing with what Vashti did. Therefore, a specific punishment must be created for this situation. Now, it says, Vashti the queen, verse 16, Vashti the queen hath not done wrong unto the king only, but also to all the princes and all the people that are in the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, right? Now, notice how Memucan puts himself completely on the king's side and puts no blame of this whole problem on the king and his drunkenness. Right? Memucan puts himself completely on the king's side. Oh, king, we're not going to bring up that you were drunken and made a bad decision. No, that's not it. Memucan put the whole blame on Vashti's conduct and then states that what she did will be told all around the kingdom, and all the men can expect the same thing from their wives, right? Therefore, she must be made an example to all women, right? So the king, Memucan comes in and completely puts himself on the king's side and basically points the finger at Vashti and that she's the problem. It's not the drunken king. That's not the problem. The problem is Vashti, right? Now, verse 18 says, likewise shall the ladies of Persia and Media say this day unto all the king's princesses which have heard of the deed of the queen, thus shall there arise too much contempt and wrath, right? Now, the result of the knowledge of what Vashti did will be contempt by the women against their husbands and wrath by the husbands against the wives. This will destroy the family unit as a whole, and eventually it will destroy the nation. Now, as Christians, decisions that we make will result in examples being set before people. We must be careful to make good decisions because people are watching our example, and it will affect their lives. Let's look at some important points on being an example. All right, important points as Christians that we need to look at as being an example. Number one, our example is very subtle and it goes deep. The reason is because it is a living example and not an abstract example. It is something that they can see and it will touch their spirits and influence them. Actions speak louder than words has been true through every generation. When you do things, when people see you do things or hear you speak words, that the living action goes much deeper than some abstract thing, okay? It has a much more deeper effect, a subtle and deeper effect on another person's life. Number two, our example travels to distant regions. People watch you, and mouths speak of what they saw. In our day today, people have phones, cameras, right? Video capability. What you do can travel literally around the world in seconds. What you do or what you say can be on the other side of the world literally in seconds. Your example can influence people around the world that you will have never met or never will meet. So we have to be careful because our example travels to distant regions in seconds, and it can affect people all over this world. Number three, our example is continuous. This is why you can never take a vacation from being an example. 20 years from now, people who knew you will 20 years from now, people who knew you will look at your life and see if you walk with God, if your walk with God is genuine. Are you still growing in the things of God, or have you given up and gone back to this world? Even after you die, your example will continue through those who knew you and were affected by your life. Number four, our example increases with higher positions of life. The higher we go in our job or in our social rank, the more people are influenced by us. If God has allowed you to move up in this world, you need to be very careful of your example. But it is also true with parents in relation to their children, right? The pastor in relation to his congregation, right? The Bible teacher in relation to the students. The Bible study leader also in relation to the people at the Bible study. Vashti made a decision, and her decision and conduct would be an example to all women throughout the kingdom, right? Vashti made this decision, and this decision would get around. Believe me, you've got the men in that room were all drunk. They knew that the king had called Vashti, and word gets around. And it would only be when these guys go back to their provinces after the party's over, tongues are going to wag. Information's going to go around, and it ain't going to take long before word gets around. The king was rejected by the queen, right? The queen disobeyed the king, and it'll empower women to come against their husbands and disobey their husbands also at times. Well, if she can do it, I can do it, right? So we're going to continue on in verse 19 next lesson, right? But until then, walk with the Lord. I know he walks with you.